Hey everyone, my name is ZeBirdBrain and today we are talking about the bucket tool. Yes, the bucket tool, because it occurred to me that I didn't do a tutorial about that wonderful thing yet. So here we go. Oh, and yes, of course, I needed a small drawing to make a tutorial about the bucket tool. So I made a small drawing with few colors. Honestly, I should have done just a crayon as usual, but hey, sometimes I want to draw, so I did a drawing. Alright, so now that this is out of the way, let's learn how to use the amazing bucket tool. Or should I say buckets? Or should I say paint tool, because that's the real name of the tool, but come on, it should be called bucket. Okay, so in Harmony, you don't have just one bucket. You have many different buckets. There's the paint, there's the ink. Ink is not a bucket. It's something else. You'll see in a moment. Then you have paint unpainted, repaint unpaint, and then stroke and close gap that are not buckets, but that are pretty useful to use with the bucket. So yeah, here we go. To paint, I'm gonna jump to my drawing view, just because it's easier to isolate, you know, my different layers. And by the way, then again, I never stop to be amazed of how cool your frames look when you look at them in the color art instead of just the line art and the color art. I mean, line art's cool, but this has a very good vibe to it too. I wanna have that as a wallpaper now. Anyway, back to the subject. Harmony has many paint buckets. Oh, and of course, if you want to paint something, you know, you need the color art to be able to paint it. If you don't know what the color art is and the line art and all these things are confusing to you, I have a tutorial just about that, so please go check it out. I'll put it in the description below and you can just, you know, check it out and have a good old time. But I assume that you know what a color art is at the moment. Okay, so let's go use the paint bucket. The paint is the most easy to understand because it just paints. So if I grab any colors, I'm gonna grab the hair color here. By the way, name your colors, very important. If you don't name your color, the superbs are gonna come in your room and like kick you or something. Be careful about the superbs. So to start up, we're gonna use the paint bucket that is just paint because it's the most straightforward of them all. What it does is it paints. So if you take a color and you circle something, everything will be painted. Or if you just click on something, it will be painted one by one. But it doesn't care if something is painted or not, it's just going to paint it. So, you know, if you had zones that didn't have paint, it's gonna fill them. If you had zones that already had paint, it's also gonna paint them. So, pretty straightforward. And then you have the ink, but we're not gonna talk about it. And then you have the paint unpainted. Paint unpainted, if I use it, at the moment, nothing is gonna be painted because all my zones are filled. Wait a second, this thing was not filled. Huh, I made a mistake. So yeah, good example. So, if you wanna make sure that you got all your zones, you can also do this and you're gonna sometimes spot some things that are not painted. In that case, I need my hair color, so I can just do whoop, and it will be painted. Now, what it's usually used for is, you know, if you have zones like the teeth here, it would require maybe finesse to fit it in. Or you can just take your color and just make a big blob and you're gonna get it. So usually, we start off rough with the paint bucket, then we do the detailing with the paint unpainted. It's pretty great. And then you have the repaint. It's pretty self-explanatory. It does the opposite of paint unpainted, so it's only gonna paint zones that already had paint. In that case, if I made a wrong choice for any of the color, I can just pick any color and just fit it in, and you know, it's pretty straightforward. Repaint is not used so much to do like color, it's more for the line art. So if I wanted to paint in my line art and I want to repaint the color of my, I don't know, here I have self-traced line. Well, at the beginning they were just, you know, painted, but when I was cleaning up, if I forgot some of the colors, because I usually do my colors as I clean up, like, you know, I select it and then I just clean up with it already. But sometimes I forget, so you can take the repaint bucket, make sure you're on the line art layer, and then you can just get the color and repaint your lines, you know, to get your effects in and stuff. So that's how you do it, it's pretty simple. Which brings me to ink. So ink is kind of like a better version of the repaint, because repaint will just paint a whole line. So if I go here on that zone and I use my repaint bucket, it'll repaint everything, which is sometimes what you want. It's like the easiest thing. But if you go to ink, then for more precise work, so if you just want to paint the lines that are inside like this one, then ink is going to kind of guess where your line breaks. So then I can just draw the inside of my character. It's very useful when you have a style that the outside line have one color and the inside lines have another. In this case, I usually take it to do my lines that are inside my shapes, like the highlights there, because like I said, they started off usually as just a normal line art, but I take my invisible color and I just paint them in with this. Something can be useful. What is also useful with the ink is that if I had a color and I want it to be behind my line art, I could press Alt and click and my line would be sent behind, which is not something that the repaint does. Last but not least, we have the stroke and close gap. Stroke and close gap are very useful because sometimes when you clean up, you forget some little gaps. So if this happens and you see you have two lines that are not exactly linked together, sometimes it's too late. You already sent your artwork over to your color art. So if this happens and you have little gaps and stuff, instead of just relying on the bucket's close gap feature, which we're going to see in a moment, you can just get a close gap and, you know, close the gap. Or you can get a stroke and you can draw the shape yourself then you want to close something with. By the way, if you get your stroke and you press on Alt, you can also link points together, which is kind of neat. So sometimes if you had shapes that maybe needed to be more curvy, you could just do that, and it's better than the close gap. Last but not least, we're going to explore the properties of the paint bucket. So it's pretty straightforward. Here you have marquee or lasso to make your zones. Here you have another kind of box to select which bucket you're using. Here, this is paint and remove. So when painting textured zone, this transforms the bitmap filling into a 100% vector-based zone and fills it with solid color. It's really rare that I use that, but hey, if this is useful to you, that's great. Here you can paint many layers at the same time. Here you can paint across multiple frames. For these two buttons, I have a video about it. You can check in the description below. And here, this is going to respect the protected color. If you don't know what that means, like these little icons there, this one too, I have a video on it. I'll also put it into the description below. That's a lot of videos. Oh my god. And, you know, you have a couple of little options like that you can go through. They're pretty self-explanatory. And then here you have the close gap feature, which will close your gap. This is something you should rely on, like in a pinch. It's not something you should depend on. So it's just to save your butt sometimes, but it's not perfect. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope this was helpful and that you'll have fun painting stuff with your lovely paint bucket. Have a nice day.